So there you have it. 57 votes for guilty, 43 for not guilty.
Donald John Trump, former President of the United States, is not guilty as charged in the article of impeachment, and he is hereby acquitted of the charge.
What we saw in that Senate today was a cowardly group of Republicans.
We have no power to convict and disqualify a former office holder who is now a private citizen.
Another sham impeachment down the drain.
This was about choosing country over Donald Trump, and 43 Republican members chose Trump.
We won, not guilty.
We are beyond anything in American history.
Donald Trump is now not only the first president in American history to be impeached twice, he's also the first to be acquitted twice in a Senate impeachment trial.
It shows the hold that Donald Trump still has, despite everything, on tens of millions of Americans and on the Republican Party.
The country is deeply divided. We're essentially living in two Americas.
Whose streets are streets? Whose streets are streets?
We're all watching the same movie, but it's like we're seeing dramatically different things happen on the screen.
It's not just Donald Trump on trial, and it's this entire era of our history. It's a reckoning of how did we get here? Who have we become? How did this happen? It all happened here, at the heart of our democracy, that magnificent Capitol building.
All within about a month, you had insurrection, you had people storming the Capitol. Weeks after that, the inauguration. And then the impeachment trial.
We saw those 9 House impeachment managers walk that single article of impeachment down the very halls where some of them were running for their lives and delivering it to the Senate chamber that we saw violent mobs storm in.
We begin tonight with the history made in Washington as the impeachment trial of former President Donald Trump gets underway.
This trial was held at the scene of the crime. The judges, the senators, they're the victims, as are the House managers of the crime.
It's a moment of truth for America.
You have the House Democrats, who are the prosecutors, led by Jamie Raskin and his team.
Our case is based on cold, hard facts. He violated his oath of office in the greatest breach of a presidential oath in U.S. history.
The Democrats are trying to make the case that everything that happened on January 6th is because of one man, and that's Donald Trump.
Let's start with the big lie, that the election was stolen.
He continued to spread the big lie.
He told his supporters the only way he could lose the election is if it was stolen.
And you heard the constant rhythm of "this is rigged."
The only way we're going to lose this election is if the election is rigged. Remember that.
It's the only way we can lose, in my opinion, is massive fraud.
On election night, he came out and declared victory when states clearly said it was too close to call the election.
This is a fraud on the American public. We were getting ready to win this election. Frankly, we did win this election.
That was the drumbeat being used to inspire, instigate, and ignite them.
At first, I was numb to it, frankly, because it was like, here we go again, Trump not telling the truth. And then it started to take hold, and then I got worried.
Stop the steal! Stop the steal! Stop the steal!
Tens of millions of Americans became convinced that the election had been stolen, that Donald Trump had actually won, despite what all the courts were saying, despite all the evidence.
The Attorney General, who has so often been on the president's side, declaring today that the Justice Department has found no evidence of widespread voting fraud.
President Trump genuinely, legitimately believes that he was cheated out of the election, and that's his right to believe that.
He allowed people who really have tremendous faith in him they can't believe that he lost the election.
I do think that the results were fraudulent. I do think there was shenanigans.
It was fraudulent, phony, and it was rigged.
Trump drilled in on Georgia.
And then in Georgia, his conduct was perhaps the most egregious.
There is clear evidence that tens of thousands of votes were switched from President Trump to former Vice President Biden in several counties throughout Georgia.
There was no evidence of any significant fraud in Georgia at all. But on January 2nd, Trump calls Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger the top election official in Georgia, and he leans on him.
Look, all I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780 votes.
Well, Mr. President, the challenge that you have is the data you have is wrong.
I only need 11,000 votes. Fellas, I need 11,000 votes. Give me a break.
He says it right there. The President of the United States telling a public official to manufacture the exact votes needed so he can win.
On January 6th, we know who lit the fuse. Donald Trump told these insurrectionists to come to the Capitol.
Show up on January 6th and get your people to fight the certification.
The president somehow got in his head that the vice president would have the authority to reject Joe Biden's electoral votes and to make Donald Trump the winner instead of Joe Biden. I mean, it was a total fantasy.
President Trump claims the election was stolen. But my colleagues, nothing before us proves illegality anywhere near the massive scale that would have tipped the entire election.
The Donald Trump supporters were in Washington, D.C. that day because he wanted them to rally and to stop what he called the steal.
Do you think Donald Trump won the election?
I absolutely believe Donald Trump won the election. And there was no talking them out of it.
And we fight. We fight like hell. We will never give up. We will never concede, because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength, and you have to be strong.
What President Trump wanted that day, he simply wanted a peaceful and honest airing of the question of whether there were election irregularities in 6 battleground states.
I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard.
President Trump kept repeating the myth that Pence could stop the certification to his base to anger them, hoping to intimidate Mike Pence.
And Mike Pence, I hope you're going to stand up for the good of our Constitution and for the good of our country. And if you're not, I'm going to be very disappointed in you. I will tell you right now.
At his signal?
After this, we're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you.
He struck a match.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol.
And he aimed it straight at this building. At us.
Take the Capitol! Take the Capitol! Take the Capitol! We are going to the Capitol, where our problems are. It's that direction.
We saw the House impeachment managers play this 13-minute long video. You heard the violence and the chaos, the sounds of it echoing throughout the chamber. There was video that we have never seen before, that the public has not seen, that the senators themselves have not seen.
We got to see for the first time what these individuals in the House and the Senate, what they were doing, how they were panicking, how they were running for their lives in some instances. We saw the heroism of Officer Eugene Goodman, who literally distracted a crowd, telling them, come over here, come this way, keeping them away from a door that, should the rioters have gone through it, they would have come face to face with members of the Senate.
like you're watching a movie that isn't real. And so for me, I actually got chills.
We know those hallways. We recognize those corners. And for that reason, I think very impactful.
It's deeply upsetting. It is anxiety-provoking. It is frightening.
That awful day could have been so much worse.
You had this clip of Senator Romney. He is just steps away from this violent mob, and he had no idea.
Romney got out in the hall, and nobody was there. Officer Goodman was coming down the hall. He was running. He said, Senator, don't go that way. Go back to the chamber right now. They're right down there. Who knows what would have happened if these rioters had run into Mitt Romney. This is an arch enemy of President Trump.
Additional security footage shows how Leader Schumer and the members of his protective detail had a near miss with the mob. They came within just yards of rioters and had to turn around.
We saw footage of the rioters coming in and searching for Nancy Pelosi.
Nancy! Oh, Nancy!
He's just yelling, Nancy, Nancy, where are you, Nancy? As if he's playing hide and seek with the Speaker of the House.
Nancy! Where are you, Nancy?
We see for the first time aides running down the halls of the Speaker's office, getting their colleagues into this one room. They're barricading the door shut.
After just 7 minutes of them barricading themselves, a group of rioters entered the hallway outside.
The staffers for House Speaker Nancy Pelosi were on the phone, whispering, because they could hear the violent mobs pounding at the door, trying to get in.
We need Capitol Police, I think, coming to the hallway. They're pounding at doors trying to find her now.
We saw for the first time security footage of Mike Pence being hustled out of the chamber and his family.
The insurgents were at one point, as you saw, 60 feet away from the vice president and the vice president's family.
I thought of Vice President Cheney on 9/11 being taken to the bunker under the White House.
At 2:24 p.m., just 12 minutes after Pence is taken out of the chamber, Donald Trump tweets an attack against his own vice president.
He tweeted, quote, Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done to protect our country and our Constitution. He further incites the mob against his own vice president.
Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done.
The insurgents amplified President Trump's tweet attacking the vice president with a bullhorn.
And then to see, the mob, screaming, hang Mike Pence, while Mike Pence was still in the building.
They came, draped in Trump's flag, and used our flag, the American flag, to batter and to bludgeon.
What the House managers did so effectively is they all told their personal stories, trying to help the Senate understand that you went through this and we did too. Jamie Raskin, his family buried their son just days before January 6th, and on the morning of January 6th, Jamie Raskin brought some of his family up to Capitol Hill.
Kids hiding under the desk, placing what they thought were their final texts and whispered phone calls to say their goodbyes. They thought they were going to die. And when they were finally rescued, I told my daughter how sorry I was, and I promised her that it would not be like this again the next time she came back to the Capitol with me. And you know what she said? She said, Dad, I don't want to come back to the Capitol. It was really just about what a terrible day that was for America, that our Capitol was brought down to the depths of hell by Donald Trump.
No matter how much truly horrifying footage we see of the conduct of the rioters, that does not change the fact that Mr. Trump is innocent of the charges against him.
Trump defense team is trying to make this argument that they recognize January 6th was a horrible day in American history, but in their eyes, can't blame Donald Trump for that.
You'd have to really be pretty thick in the head to have watched Donald J. Trump over the past 5 years and think that he would ever condone any aspect of mob violence.
Donald Trump was an easy target to blame. Do you think this guy was telling this group to overthrow the government of the United States? No, he wasn't. He did not want it to turn violent.
It is constitutional cancel culture.
And really at the core of Trump's defense is that the trial itself should not even be happening, that it's unconstitutional because he is a former president.
So the constitutionality argument is what Donald Trump's team is going to hang on here.
The Democrats are trying to cancel the guy who 74 million Americans voted for. They don't want President Trump on the ballot ever again.
It's unconstitutional. It's political shenanigans, and it's an effort to, in my opinion, damage the fine legacy that President Trump should enjoy in history.
But the House managers say Donald Trump's legacy is that he allowed an insurrection, an attack on one of our branches of government to happen.
The House managers weren't just talking about how Donald Trump incited the riot before it happened. They were also talking about what he did while those rioters were rampaging through the Capitol.
They talk about Trump's lack of action.
He watched it on TV like a reality show.
I've been in that little room off the Oval Office where he sits and watches a big screen TV, and I can easily imagine it happening as he thought, well, let's see what comes next.
We know that Donald Trump rebuffed efforts to call the National Guard up to Capitol Hill.
You better run, cops! At 4:17 p.m., Mr. Trump released a pre-recorded video saying to the mob, "Go home, we love you, you're very special."
This was a fraudulent election, but we can't play into the hands of these people. We have to have peace. So go home, we love you, you're very special.
We also know how President Trump himself felt about the attack. He told us. Here's what he tweeted at 6:01 as the Capitol was in shambles. These are the things and events that happen when a sacred landslide election victory is so unceremoniously and viciously stripped away from great patriots. Remember this day forever. The President of the United States sided with the insurrections. He celebrated their cause.
The House managers didn't just talk about the past. They explicitly said that this is also about the future. That if there isn't accountability for what Donald Trump did, that the real danger is it could happen again.
These were domestic terrorists, and the attack on the Capitol was their Bunker Hill. It was their call to arms. They got close, and they know it, and they like it.
The insurrection was the most violent and dangerous episode so far in Donald Trump's continuing pattern and practice of inciting violence. But I emphasize so far.
This was far more organized, far more sinister than it at first appeared.
Think about that video that the New Yorker released. That individual yelling at a Capitol Hill police officer, saying, "Your boss, Donald Trump, sent us here." That's why we're here. That's what we're doing.
The body cam videos from the police officers show just how ferocious this fight was.
watching someone use an American flagpole, the flag still on it, to spear and pummel one of our police officers ruthlessly, mercilessly, tortured by a pole with a flag on it that he was defending with his very life.
Let's get to the bottom of what happened there. The one thing I'm sure about is that the president did not cause that.
How do you incite a breach of the Capitol when it was already pre-planned? How do you incite a breach of the Capitol when you tell the people at the rally to peacefully and patriotically make their voices heard?
Cops have a tough enough job without having people from their own country carrying the American flag, crushing them. To see someone in uniform suffering like that and to keep it going, it's a disgrace. I mean, to me, it shows they're animals.
They were calling them, our African-American officers, by the N-word. These officers were holding back with such restraint when they were being so under assault that the trauma to them, 140 or so of them still injured.
We saw just how overwhelmed police were that day. But then during the trial, for the first time, we heard the radio calls of these officers asking for more help.
What you are about to hear has not been made public before.
Capital injuries! Multiple capital injuries! We're dismantling the reviewing stand and throwing metal poles at us. Give me DSO up here now! DSO! There's explosions going on up here. I don't know if it's fireworks or what, but they're starting to explode explosives.
That was some of the most brutal combat I've ever encountered. At one point I got tased. People were yelling out, we got one, we got one.
The crowd would say, we're here for you, we're fighting for you, as they beat the officers up.
I don't want to see you get hurt. When the whole country hates I want you to go home. Go, let's go.
And it makes no sense.
At one point, people started chanting, kill him with his own gun.
How do you tell those police officers who fought for 4 or 5 hours against a mob that what happened to them needs to be just forgotten? Let's just forget about it and move on.
Brian Sicknick was a Capitol police officer who was among those fighting back against the rioters. And he died as a result of injuries that he sustained during that riot. He was defending the Capitol. He was defending the members of Congress.
Officers ended up with head damage and brain damage. People's eyes were gouged. An officer had a heart attack. An officer lost 3 fingers that day. 2 officers have taken their own lives. This cannot be the future of America.
They put themselves on video doing this, and their faces are identifiable, and so are their actions.
By all accounts, this is the biggest domestic FBI investigation ever. They announced recently that they had at least 400 suspects that were under investigation, with hundreds more that were being investigated.
Thank you.
As the head of the ADL, the oldest anti-hate organization in the world, and we've never had a moment like this before. Now, many of these people belong to armed militias, groups like the Oath Keepers or the 3%ers. These are people who, if you will, militate against the federal government, who have a very sort of exaggerated notion of the Second Amendment.
The Oath Keepers, they've got this yellow emblem that's on their chest, but they are also in body armor.
And then you have white supremacists. These are individuals who have a twisted view about race and believe that there are minorities seeking to undermine the white race.
These were individuals who had words like Camp Auschwitz on their chest, who said the most vile and hateful things to police officers.
Richard Barnett, the guy who went into Speaker Pelosi's office, put his feet on her desk.
Richard Barnett bragged about his actions. He was proud of the way he desecrated the Speaker of the House's office.
Nancy, Big O was here, you biatch.
Just showed what a pig he was. Just a pig. The Speaker of the House, not to be respectful of that.
The Proud Boys are very chauvinist, very misogynist, anti-Semitic, and often believe they take violence into their own hands.
You can see Pizzola in the mob. Pizzola is the man in the center of the photo with the gray beard.
QAnon is a far-right extremist group. They've gone to Trump rallies. You often see them holding these cardboard cutout Qs above their heads. We see them on January 6th as part of these groups that storm the Capitol.
Jacob Chansley is the self-described shaman of Q. He's the guy with the face paint and the horns, who you see right there on the Senate floor.
This isn't an episode of Bewitched where all of a sudden there's a peaceful crowd, they show up at the Capitol, and suddenly things turn violent, and bling, there's a bunch of weapons for them. They knew that these people had a level of planning.
The FBI identified the device as a 950,000-volt stun gun walking stick. The weapon could have caused serious pain and incapacitated anyone Barnett had used it against.
Larry Brock, who was arrested for his role in the insurrection, was photographed on the Senate floor wearing a helmet, tactical gear, and carrying flex cuffs. Eric Munchell, like Brock, he was dressed in what appears to be tactical gear, also holding up flex cuffs.
The crowd is using munitions against us. They have bear spray in the crowd. Bear spray in the crowd.
Some of these insurgents were heard saying, quote, that they hope to find Vice President Mike Pence and execute him by hanging him from a Capitol Hill tree as a traitor.
Vice President Mike Pence is Donald Trump's #2 person. The mob was literally chasing him down, chanting, "Hang Mike Pence, hang Mike Pence." They'd set up a gallows outside.
And yet, what's so terrifying about that day are the thousands of ordinary people who accompanied them.
We stood by you for months! Let us in!
These are people of means, people with minds, people willing to do Donald Trump's bidding until they cross the legal line.
One of the things that it signals, that when the American mainstream has embraced extremism to this level, it tells me that something is dramatically changing in the United States.
So you have Guy Raffitt. He stormed the Capitol, breaking in. He's inside on video, and his son actually sees that video and decides to turn his own father in.
The way he's been manipulated into thinking by these extremist groups and what's been fed to him was worrying enough that I don't know what he was going to do next.
You had retired police officers, retired U.S. service members. There was even a guy who is the owner of the Kissing Tree Winery. They grow Sangiovese in Texas, and now he is one of those facing very serious charges.
Clete Keller was probably the best known person who was identified at the Capitol and charged. Two-time Olympian, 6'6", wearing a USA jacket, and now charged with 7 federal crimes.
So far, the insurrectionists that have been charged and entered pleas have pleaded not guilty.
Well, nearly 75 million Americans voted for Donald Trump. Obviously, the vast majority of them had nothing to do with what happened on January 6th in the Capitol, and in fact, many of them were horrified.
Well, a lot of people came to that rally not as part of an extremist group, not to storm the Capitol. They came because they had been told that this election had been stolen.
I did vote for him because I vote policy, not people. I'm not surprised that they went to the Capitol because they were there for a rally and a march, but I was stunned at the violence and at the insurrection aspect of it.
I was there to silently protest, add to the numbers of which there were tens of thousands of people there, and did approach the Capitol building, but was intelligent enough and law-abiding enough to know that 150 yards or so away from the Capitol building was close enough.
Today is ours. We won the day. That's why Donald Trump has asked everybody to just go home.
As the weeks have gone by, the charges have gotten more serious: conspiracy to obstruct government activity, in this case, the actions of Congress. There have been other felony charges, some carrying penalties as much as 20 years.
So now you have this stark contrast playing out, where Trump is now acquitted, but you have his supporters accused of breaking into the Capitol. They are going to face significant consequences.
I think they're stunned that they've been arrested, a lot of them.
I thought I was following my president. I thought I was following what we were called to do.
Jacob Chansley is the man that left a note on Vice President Mike Pence's desk.
It's only a matter of time. Justice is coming.
By January 6th, my client was heeding the president's call to save our nation.
Dominic Pezzola, otherwise known as Spazo, a member of the Proud Boys.
He's charged with conspiracy, destruction of property, and basically interfering with Congress. They were misled, they were duped. The whole Stop the Steal. Mr. Pezzola, along with thousands of other people, bought that. They went to the Capitol in response to the requests, the instructions. You could almost call them the orders of Donald Trump.
This defense that some of these idiots have put forward, saying that President Trump was urging them to go and engage in any aspect of unlawful activity, is absolutely absurd.
The president told you to do it, but that didn't mean you had to do it. Doesn't our mother always tell us, if your friends jump off a bridge, you're going to jump off the bridge? The president told you to do it. Yes, he incited your worst fears and your hatred, but that's your hatred. And that's your fear that caused you to betray your country.
His words became their actions. His commands led to their actions.
We will never, ever surrender.
He's the first Twitter president at a time when the media itself was acting as a filter in a way which didn't allow him to get his message out.
Re-sharing the same message over and over and over again.
Fake news. Fake news.
Fake news.
If we hear something enough times, even if it doesn't start out as true, it becomes true in our minds.
Fake news was a weapon that Trump used to undermine not just the media, but to undermine the very possibility of knowing truth from falsehood.
Facts don't matter to Trump. Trump makes up his own facts, and then he tries to create a world where people come in and accept his facts as reality.
Donald Trump came at the exact moment when Americans were losing faith in journalism. And so when he said, if you don't agree with it, it's fake news. Well, a lot of people were like, that sounds good, because there's a lot of stuff I don't agree with, that I don't want to hear, that I don't want to believe, and now I can dismiss it.
What it really says is, hey, don't believe them, believe me.
Trump has labeled the press the enemy of the people, and as such, we are treated like the enemy.
How about the press? Look at them back there. Look at all of them. How about the press? It's a lot of press. And I think a lot of you despise them.
And you are standing in the middle of an arena surrounded by thousands of people who turn around and start screaming at you, start calling you liars, saying that you are a traitor.
Our media is not free. It's not fair. It's become the enemy of the people.
We are not the enemy of the people.
You're all friggin' fake news. You're all pieces of... You're traitors to America.
It is words that I heard again on January 6th outside of the Capitol.
This was a pattern and practice of months of activity. That is the incitement. That is the incitement. The activity he was engaged in for months before January 6th.
When the House Democrats were making the case that this was incitement, they weren't just talking about the speech that he gave an hour before the Capitol was invaded.
I think he has widened the divide in this country purposefully for his own benefit, again, to stoke and stir up hatred in this country.
The seeds for this were planted in 2016 and early 2017.
Ever since he became president, Trump revealed what he thought of political violence. For his side, he praised it and he encouraged it.
So if you see somebody getting ready to throw a tomato, knock the crap out of them, would you? Seriously.
A lot of people hid their true feelings for many, many years. And then all of a sudden, Trump came out and everyone said, hey, it's a right to be like this. Look at that, the president's like this. His racism, his sexism, his xenophobia, his homophobia, that resonates with a lot of people too.
That's the standard party line that the Democratic Party uses against Republican candidates. They're racist. Donald Trump is not a racist. Donald Trump, once again, has been very proactive for the black community throughout his administration. The fact that he wouldn't pander states a lot about him.
Trump's rhetoric and the kind of words that he tells his supporters is that he puts things in very stark terms.
These are people only believe in jihad. I can name Kung Flu.
We have some bad hombres here, and we're going to get them out.
Omar has a history of launching vicious anti-Semitic screeds.
That there's only so much to go around because interlopers, agitators, outsiders, people who don't belong, non-Americans, un-Americans are coming in and they are taking from that limited pot of resources.
Trump trashed the whole idea of diversity and inclusiveness. He had one America. You could come in if you were nice about it.
People say, well, that's not his intention or it was accidental. I don't actually think that that matters. What I think matters is that he's been willing to do wink and nods, that he's been willing to do dog whistles.
There will be no more low-income housing forced into the suburbs.
And at other times, he's been willing to use megaphones in order to broadcast a message.
They want to indoctrinate our children, defund our police, abolish the suburbs, incite riots, and leave every city at the mercy of the radical left.
One of the things you hear again and again from Trump supporters all over the country is that he was politically incorrect.
Like him or love him, hate him, whatever you want to call it, he speaks the truth. He speaks right from the heart, just right out of his mouth, and I like that.
He told it like it was and is, and that was something they generally don't hear from politics. He did become extremely popular with a large segment of Americans, many of whom who had never participated in the political process.
He's a very clever guy on these issues. Now, he disavowed racism when he had to, but he welcomed their support, that's for sure.
From the moment that Donald Trump plays footsie with racists, we know that that is going to be the tenor and texture of his presidential administration.
Trump under fire after Charlottesville, after saying both sides share the blame.
Very fine people on both sides.
The neo-Nazis, the Klansmen, and Proud Boys invaded the city, the great city of Charlottesville, and killed Heather Heyer.
That was him saying to those fringe folks, you know what, you're not a bad person.
One of the very telling moments from the trial was when one of our attorneys was able to play the entire President Trump answer.
Very fine people on both sides, except that isn't all he said.
He condemned groups like these right-wing groups that are bad actors. For many in the media, there will never be enough condemning.
You will not replace us!
He saw what happened down there. It was a horrendous scene, and yet he brushed it off as nothing. That was, in so many ways, a dog whistle and gave people permission to do it again.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States.
Donald Trump's rhetoric provides, I think, warm comfort for people with racial grievances against diversity and against a changing nation.
Amidst all the protests following the killing of George Floyd, Donald Trump tweeted video from a pro-Trump rally in the Villages community in Florida, a parade of golf carts, and one of the people in the video turns to the camera and says, "White power."
White power!
Donald Trump retweeted that video. And his tweet said, "Thank you to the great people of the villages."
Donald Trump being the first president in my lifetime to openly support and bolster white supremacy, horrifying.
In a statement, the White House says the president did not hear the one statement made on the video, adding, what he did see was tremendous enthusiasm from his many supporters.
The message that sent was, I'm on your side. I get you. I've got your back. And he can disavow that, but that's not the way it works. He welcomed the support of the kind of people who would scream white power in the 21st century.
For the past 4 years, ABC News has been tracking criminal cases across the country. And we found at least 54 cases where President Trump was specifically invoked in connection with violence, threats, and alleged assaults. Trump's rhetoric was being translated by violent defendants who took action.
This Trump-inspired mob may indeed look familiar to you. Confederate battle flags, MAGA hats, weapons. The siege of the Michigan State House was effectively a state-level dress rehearsal.
Donald Trump had a huge feud going with Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer.
I will continue to keep you informed.
It was largely because Whitmer had dared to criticize him and to criticize the federal response. And so at one point, April 17th, the president actually goes out on Twitter and says, "Liberate Michigan." It seems as if he is telling people in Michigan to defy the law, to defy their governor.
Angry protesters, some of them armed, spilling into the Capitol in Michigan, demanding the country reopen.
President Trump refused to condemn the attacks on the Michigan Capitol or denounce the violent lawbreakers.
Your governor who doesn't have a clue, open up your state, Madam Governor, open up your state.
13 suspects, members of a militia group, now facing charges in an alleged plot to storm the State House, kidnap Governor Gretchen Whitmer, and start a civil war.
This feels a lot like storming the Capitol, does it not?
This was his essential MO.
These people are not going to take it any longer.
His most extreme followers ready to fight like hell for their hero. Just like they'd answered his call in Michigan.
They're pounding on the doors and the elevators.
It's easy, it's a dirty
He has been a gift in that he has inspired us to look at ourselves. I think we're going to look back on this time and really think about what happens when we normalize bad behavior.
Let's start with the president's incitement of the Proud Boys. Many of you have heard of this group, which since 2018 has been classified by the FBI as an extremist organization.
That moment in the debate.
Are you willing tonight to condemn white supremacists and militia groups?
Sure. What do you want to call them? Give me a name. Give me a
white
name.
Supremacists and
Who would
right
you like me to condemn?
White
Proud
supremacists and right
Proud
militia.
Boys, stand back and stand by.
When he tells them to stand back, that sounds good. And then stand by for what?
Everybody heard what he was saying. His inability to condemn with the same vehemence that he went after his political enemies, these extremists and domestic terrorists, sent the signal that I've got your back.
What is fundamentally the more dangerous part of it is they're hearing that he's saying, stand by. That's a call to action to them.
Donald Trump did go on Sean Hannity's show.
I condemn all white supremacists. I condemn the Proud Boys.
It's not that Donald Trump has never condemned extremist groups. It's that he has seemed so reluctant to do so.
The group adopted that phrase, stand back and stand by, as their official slogan. They created merchandise with their new slogan, which they wore proudly across their backs.
These are movements that have been on the rise throughout the past couple of years in our country, but they have been enabled even more so by the fact that Donald Trump's administration did not condemn them at critical moments that really mattered.
I had never even heard of QAnon, and I never even heard of the Proud Boys. They're minor players in the grand scheme of things. This whole QAnon I think they don't represent the right. They don't represent the Republican Party. I think the media is using them to make Donald Trump look bad.
You now have conspiracy theorists, people that come out and say certain things didn't happen. And that's where the circle widens to QAnon. And they came to Washington to protest and support Donald Trump.
One of the first people to reach Pence's desk, Jay Pachansley, who calls himself the QAnon shaman.
In 2019, the FBI classifies QAnon as a domestic terrorist threat. They say that they are extremists driven by conspiracy theories.
QAnon looked at Donald Trump as the guy that was going to save the world. Donald Trump knows that some of his most fervent supporters are supporters of QAnon, and he just can't bring himself to criticize the movement.
The QAnon movement appears to be gaining a lot of followers.
Well, I don't know much about the movement other than I understand they like me very much, which I appreciate.
Now, can you just once and for all disavow QAnon in its entirety?
I know nothing about QAnon. I do know they are very much against pedophilia. They fight it very hard.
This is somebody who always, all he cares about is these are people who support me.
People voted for Trump because they were desperate, some of them. They were absolutely convinced that this system wasn't working for them. I think a lot of that is why you get movements like QAnon. People looking for answers and finding in the swamps of social media and other places the lies and fantasies that seem to make enough sense to them because nothing else does.
When I was in this, I believed it because I was just like, the government, there's nobody good in it. I just feel like the rational thinking just started to kind of go away, like you lose touch with reality in a way. When the president was sworn in, I was crying. I was just heartbroken. I thought that the worst was going to happen. I thought we were going to get taken over by China.
Well, I was wrong. And it sucks. The conspiracies keep going, it was fake, it was pre-recorded. I don't think I'm going to bite into that one.
It's hard to mentally unpack what you believe so much that was real, that is not real at all.
If you don't denounce the movement, you're enabling it. You're complicit, and you're saying, by de facto, I'm supporting what they did, which is exactly what he did.
They are terrified because I'm going to be their worst nightmare.
Marjorie Taylor Greene is a freshman congresswoman from Georgia. She has pushed the most outlandish, racist, anti-Semitic conspiracy theories.
We won't have that here in Northwest Georgia.
But Congresswoman Greene found a friend in Donald Trump. She had his support, and right after she won her primary, he tweeted, "Congratulations to future Republican star Marjorie Taylor Greene, a real winner."
I wasn't a political person until I found a candidate that I really liked, and his name is Donald J. Trump when he ran for president. To me, he was someone I could relate to, someone that I enjoyed his plain talk.
A new controversy emerged of some of the things that she had said.
The so-called plane that crashed into the Pentagon. It's odd, there's never any evidence shown for a plane in the Pentagon.
She has endorsed the baseless QAnon and 9/11 conspiracy theories, even suggested at one point that House Speaker Nancy Pelosi be executed.
You have an elected official who had suggested that House Speaker Nancy Pelosi could be executed for treason.
These things do not represent me. They do not represent my district, and they do not represent my values.
Nancy Pelosi delivered one of the most damning lines the last couple weeks.
We will probably need a supplemental for more security for members when the enemy is within the House of Representatives.
The enemy is within.
At one point, Twitter temporarily suspended the account of Marjorie Taylor Greene for spreading election disinformation, but it was after the riot that we saw the biggest deplatforming in the history of social media.
The president's Twitter account has been silenced forever.
So the president's banned from Twitter, 88 million followers, banned from Facebook, 35 million followers.
Twitter saying, quote, "We have permanently suspended the account due to the risk of further incitement of violence."
These social media companies, they're effectively outside the law. You basically got 4 men who have determined what they believe is right in America. And unfortunately, much of what they believe is right is very left.
If you don't follow their narrative, then they punish you for it. And they shut you down.
The censorship that the social media oligarchs are engaging right now is a great threat to our American democracy and frankly is despicable.
What are the standards that we as a society hold these companies to? What are the standards that they hold their users to? Every decision that might have been made over the course of years was instead made in the heat of the moment when the absolute worst case scenario was unfolding.
The one thing that we all can't lose sight of, just because Donald Trump doesn't have batteries in his microphone anymore, his people, his supporters, they are still loyal to Donald Trump, and they're waiting to see what happens next.
What are you going to do with 81 million followers that's interested in everything that you do and looking for your guidance and your leadership? You're going to follow them.
We aren't having fun here. This is about the most miserable experience I've had down here in Washington, D.C.
Donald Trump's legal team, they are not Washington insiders. They are not constitutional scholars. One, in fact, is a personal injury attorney.
It wasn't like the usual cast of characters that have been around Donald Trump for the last couple years. These guys came out of nowhere.
We're trial lawyers. We're not politicians. We aren't on the left side or the right side or any side at all.
The Democrats are playing to a larger audience, and I don't know what the president's attorneys are doing.
They came out swinging. That is Donald Trump.
These depositions should be done in person, in my office, in Philadelphia.
I spent more than 3 decades locking up killers, and I do know a little bit about applying the facts to the law.
The Trump team, they weren't ready for prime time.
I mean, I had 8 days to get ready for this thing.
Personal injury lawyer tried it like he was in a courtroom in a fender bender in Philadelphia. The tone was contemptuous, sneering.
Bruce Castor leads off day one of the Trump defense. And he gets up there and he says, we're switching this up.
I'll be quite frank with you. We changed what we were going to do on account that we thought that the House manager's presentation was well done.
I've covered Donald Trump for a long time. If there's one thing you know about Donald Trump, you don't give the other side credit, period.
The former president's defense team is a mess. One of the lead lawyers, David Schoen, actually threatened to resign because of a disagreement about the use of some of the videos they had put together. So this is hardly a fine-tuned legal defense team.
We had a group that came together and under very challenging conditions put together a strong defense of President Trump in this. We got it done.
The reason we're here is the hard left hates Donald Trump.
We're going to go through what I think is the stupidest week, certainly in my history in the Senate, maybe ever.
I think the president's lawyers blew the House manager case out of the water. They legally eviscerated them.
Senator Bernie Sanders asked a question that had the phrasing, "in your judgment," in the question. And when it was Van der Veen's turn to answer, he said,
"My judgment? Who asked that?"
I did.
My judgment's irrelevant in this proceeding. It absolutely is.
And I think that is what Trump wanted to see out of the legal team. And I think in that way, he got what he wanted.
Donald Trump declined to testify at this trial, so we're left with questions.
The big question is, what was Donald Trump doing while this attack was going down?
Trump was watching the events unfold. That I know.
He had been on the phone with people in the Hill as this was happening.
Kevin McCarthy, he's the Republican leader in the House, and he was furious. He was begging Donald Trump to come out and calm the crowds.
I called the president, explained to him what was going on. I know he put a tweet out. I begged him to go talk to the nation. Don't do it by Twitter.
Congresswoman Jamie Herrera Butler tweets this statement out right before the trial is expected to wrap. And she says that she has more details about that phone call between McCarthy and Trump.
She says the president had initially repeated the falsehood that it was Antifa that had breached the Capitol. McCarthy refuted that and told the president that these were Trump supporters. She had even shared that with her local NBC station.
And the president's response to Kevin, to me, was chilling. He said, well, Kevin, I guess they're just more upset about the election, theft than you are.
This is explosive because it gets to what Donald Trump was doing during those first hours while the riot was underway.
We would like the opportunity to subpoena Congresswoman Herrera regarding her communications with House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy.
There is breaking news in this trial.
This trial has taken a turn.
You don't know what's going to happen.
There is some frantic huddling on both sides of the aisle.
Confusion and outrage there inside of the Senate chamber happening right now.
We immediately had a list of over 300 witnesses that we already had prepared, ready to go. Nancy Pelosi is going to be witness number one.
In the end, they made the political calculus that witnesses would delay this trial too long, and that's because they felt like this would impact Joe Biden's agenda.
The House impeachment managers and Trump's defense team decide to just enter Congresswoman Jaime Herrera Beutler's statement, and that allows the trial to just move forward.
What we needed was not more witnesses, but more senators with spines.
Trump's lawyers have no real answer to that question about what he knew about Vice President Mike Pence, his condition, and what was happening.
The vice president who was presiding over the Senate chamber was hustled out.
I'm sure Mr. Trump very much is concerned and was concerned for the safety and well-being of Mr. Pence and everybody else that was over here.
Mike Pence was one of the most loyal people of them all. And at the end of the day, Donald Trump turns on him and puts his life at risk.
We know that the president would never have wanted such a riot to occur.
He's always trying to create a made-for-TV moment. And there would be nothing more made for TV than let's march to the Capitol. Even if he didn't want them to lay siege to the Capitol.
I took it as to, stand up for your word and stand up for what you believe in, and you can peacefully protest. I didn't see it as go to the Capitol and start threatening people's lives and destroying buildings. President Trump did not make anybody break the law, encourage anybody to break the law.
Another aspect of the argument was that Donald Trump has a free speech right to say whatever he wants to say.
And we fight. We fight like hell.
These are the metaphorical, rhetorical uses of the word fight. Suddenly, the word fight is off limits. Spare us the hypocrisy and false indignation.
They talk about the number of times the president said we need to fight or fight like hell. And you had Chuck Schumer, you had Eric Swalwell, you had countless number of Democrats use the exact same expression.
Every single politician in America, from dog catcher to president of the United States, uses such language. If you're a Democrat like Jamie Raskin, you can point to President Trump's speech and say, we want to hold him to a different standard as everybody else.
There was also video compilations of Democrats and some Democratic senators in that room using the word fight.
I am going to wake up every day and fight hard.
We do fight back, but we are going to fight back. There was laughter from both sides of the aisle, frankly, from the Democrats, because they didn't think that the argument really equated to what the former president did.
We were talking about fight for better health care, fight for better schools, fight for cleaner air, not go fight to stop the counting of the electoral ballots. And context matters.
Senators will take their seats.
Now is the time to vote your conscience.
This is a Rorschach test. You either view Donald Trump through the prism of his reality or reality. There are, as Kellyanne Conway so famously said, alternative facts. And the people who, at the end of the day, who voted to acquit Donald Trump sided with the Donald Trump version of reality, which is not actually what happened in our country.
The Senate is now ready to vote on the article of impeachment.
When it came time for the final vote, it was 57 to 43.
Senators, is the respondent Donald John Trump guilty or not guilty?
Ms. Baldwin,
Guilty. Mrs. Blackburn. Ms. Duckworth. Mr. Durbin. Mr. Graham. Mr. Hoven. Mr. Menendez. Mr. Shelby. Young. Not guilty.
The yeas are 57. The nays are 43. Donald John Trump, former President of the United States, is not guilty as charged in the article of impeachment.
The headline is that 7 Republicans broke ranks and voted to convict Donald Trump. That's huge.
The surprises there, Richard Burr and Bill Cassidy. Donald John Trump, the only American president to impeach twice, has now been acquitted twice by the Senate.
It was by far the most bipartisan impeachment and conviction vote in the history of the United States.
We can go and put this behind us, but I think the sad reality is that for many Democrats and partisans in Washington, they're going to continue as long as President Trump has the support of 75 million Americans and is the single biggest name, the single biggest influence in American politics.
Acquitted! What did I tell you? I'm proud of President Trump. Now let's move on. Because, what else you got?
The acquittal is heartbreaking on so many levels, but I believe the impeachment trial will show for history that this was the worst traitor, betrayer of his oath and of our democracy.
We'll ask the Senate to pass legislation that would award Capitol Police Officer Eugene Goodman the Congressional Gold Medal. His courage in the line of duty, his foresight in the midst of chaos, and his willingness to make himself a target of the mob's rage so that others might reach safety. Officer Goodman is in the chamber tonight. Officer Goodman, thank you.
Irony, right? That they would give Goodman the Congressional Gold Medal and stand and applaud for him, and then for all of the Capitol Police who protected them, who saved their lives, and then vote to acquit the person who tried to kill them.
The Republican Party is completely fractured right now. They have some serious soul searching to do.
This isn't their Republican Party anymore. This is Donald Trump's Republican Party.
I think President Trump, he's the present and the future of the GOP.
He is now a twice impeached and disgraced figure who should be isolated for his crimes against the Union, and he becomes a serious political problem for the Republican Party.
Some in the Republican Party hoped that this impeachment trial would be the opportunity for them to make a break away from President Trump and the stronghold that he's had over their party for so long.
The abuse of power and betrayal of his oath meet the constitutional standard of high crimes and misdemeanors.
In the end, the majority of them decided to not go that route. They hitched their wagons once again to Donald Trump.
The most potent force in the Republican Party is President Trump. We need Trump plus.
It's interesting. He has been out of sight for the longest stretch of time, really, in his life as a public figure.
Cecilia Vega, Chief White House Correspondent. We have a statement from former President Trump.
This has been yet another phase of the greatest witch hunt in the history of our country. No president has ever gone through anything like it, and it continues because our opponents cannot forget the almost 75 million people.
You probably saw that statement from former President Trump yesterday. He said his political movement has only just begun. Will he remain a force in the Republican Party?
I think his force wanes. The Republican Party is more than just one person. The Republican is about ideas. Now, the American people, they want a leader accountable and a leader who they can trust.
Just because there was an acquittal doesn't mean that there was no responsibility.
Yet another sham. More money wasted, time wasted of not helping the American people. It's time we wake up and we start focusing on what we need to do for this country.
You have a president who was impeached twice, and you have a president who was soundly defeated after one term. and the Republicans can't find a way to get themselves out from under his shadow.
Republicans are trying to figure out the party's identity going forward, but they also realize that they need Trump's base.
There is no one who can compete with the kind of support that Donald Trump generates.
If Trump runs in 2024, I think I probably would vote for him.
And then if he desires, come back stronger than ever in 2024.
And we will make America great again.
There's going to be a punishment tour for the people that went against Donald Trump. Matt Gaetz and other Trump loyalists went to Wyoming to protest Liz Cheney, who voted for Donald Trump's impeachment.
What I will predict now is that every single member of the House of Representatives on the Republican side who voted to impeach Donald J. Trump will not be a congressman after the 2022 election. They either won't dare to run or they will be beaten.
Donald Trump is in Mar-a-Lago obsessing over how to get back at those who betrayed him. Every one of those Republicans who voted for impeachment in the House or conviction in the Senate will face the wrath of those who support Donald Trump.
Voting to impeach was an easy decision for me. I mean, I recognize the difficulties of it and the blowback, but I mean, I had no choice.
I don't take an oath to Donald Trump. I don't take an oath to the Republican Party. I take an oath to defend our Constitution, and that's what I will do.
Absolute gut-wrenching. Impeaching a president, especially a president of my own party, was nothing that we ever hoped to do.
And if they don't fight, we have to primary the hell out of the ones that don't fight. You primary them.
It's not just politically they're coming after you. This angry mob is still out there. And we still have death threats going on against members of Congress.
Classic Trump, which I think made him really, really dangerous as well, was his ability to exact revenge against his enemy.
If there's one Trumpian word that exists in the world, it's retribution. You cross them at the moment that it matters. Buckle up.
The president's problems don't end with impeachment. He's facing numerous investigations, criminal and civil. He's looking at some trouble.
Donald Trump is going to face a very busy time in the months and years ahead. There are criminal investigations, particularly out of New York, into his business dealings.
The Trump family brand is seriously diminished right now. He is a man on an island of himself right now, and his business empire is in serious trouble.
It's a very big deal that the Trumps, born and raised in New York, are now leaving for Florida.
There's simply no calculating the impact of moving from sitting behind the Resolute desk in the Oval Office to sitting by the swimming pool at Mar-a-Lago.
Wherever Donald Trump, the father, has gone, those children have followed. They were with him in real estate. They were with him when he did The Apprentice.
As an outsider's point of view, you know, David, I'm watching you get killed right now by Richard.
And they went with him into the world of politics. They've all followed Donald Trump yet again to Florida. After January 6th, the Trump family was told, you need to go on hiatus. Go dark for a bit.
President Trump is reportedly discussing another run for the White House in 2024.
We know he's keeping open the possibility of a presidential run.
I think Donald Trump will make us think that he's going to run for re-election in 2024 for a long time. I don't know if he will actually pull the trigger. I actually doubt that he will run again, but he will want to keep everybody guessing.
We are going to keep on winning, winning, winning.
I think Donald Trump will be our 47th president. I really do. He'll have every bit of the support he had last time and more.
I doubt that he runs, but don't write Donald Trump off.
The Donald Trump era is not over, and the Donald Trump era for the GOP is not over.
I don't know if Trumpism is here to stay. I think in many ways it was an extension of his sort of singular persona.
You will not replace us!
But I do think what we've seen in recent years, the polarization and its kind of lasting impact, I'm afraid that is here to stay.
His final tweet is that he was not going to attend the inauguration of his successor, of Joe Biden, as president. He would have been a bigger man if he had gone up and sat there, as all of his predecessors had done almost, and affirmed the transfer of power. But he couldn't, because he's a small man.
We love you. We will be back in some form. Life, we will thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
And now the end is near.
It had to end with a made-for-TV moment. Air Force One slowly driving on the tarmac to Frank Sinatra's My Way.
I don't think we've seen the last of Donald Trump. I think if we've learned anything about Donald Trump, don't underestimate him.
We never let our children just walk away from their mistakes. There has to be accountability, and we as well have to have our reckoning for us to move on.